All right, my name is David Wonderly. I'm going to talk a little bit about documentation, not necessarily on the how to document something. All of us have been around long enough to know what exactly documentation is, but kind of some do's and don'ts and some philosophy behind it. Here recently, documentation's kind of lost, especially in the KDE world, has lost some of what it had. You know, it's very few and far between. The docs are old, bad, whatever. So what exactly documentation is? It has no use if it doesn't answer the questions that people ask. A simple way to get information on what people ask is user forums and the chat rooms. You know, you can go to any chat room and you can see the most basic of questions being asked all day long. And the reason this is, you know, all this should be done in the documentation itself. Everyone at one point in time started looking for help. Whether you guys went online somewhere, use Google, everyone does it. The goal of documentation is to take the basic form and put it in the help doc. So you just go to help, you know, about help, and bring up a list of things. When writing documentation, we're all the experts here. We know what goes on. We know every shortcut there is to know. We know how to jump around. Just remember that when you're writing it, you're writing it for the person that has no clue what Control F does, what Control whatever does. They don't know. So you don't want to placate them to where you're being so obvious and so open that it's kind of ridiculous, but at the same time you need to have an element of that. A good rule to follow is if your grandmother can follow along with what you're doing at a computer, then you're doing your job right. One of the biggest questions that I get from people when we talk about documentation is, well, where do we start? You know, you open up your editor and all you're looking at is a blank sheet of paper. And there's a little couple clues that I'll give and a couple outlines that'll kind of help with that. First off, always remember that over-documenting something is worse than bad documentation. You know, you don't create a 50-page document when 5 pages will do. Don't create 5 pages when 5 bullet points will do. Keep it very simple. Keep it to the point. If they need to know more information or more advanced topics, that's when they can go to forums, chat rooms, Google. You know, blogs are full of advanced how to manipulate something. Places like this is perfect for that. What would you kind of rather have? Would you rather have a 500-page document that explains every piece of information that software is possible of? Or a 50-page document that gives an overview? Or a 10-page document that gives a good overview, a good how-to? Just for maintaining documents, because we all know how software changes. We all know how fast it changes, how fast things get upgraded. You're more likely to be able to maintain a 10, 15-page document than a 500-page book online to be able to change everything. Here's some general steps that you should probably include in writing when you're starting fresh, blank sheet of paper. Is start writing an outline. What do you want it to say? What different points are you going to cover in it? Then you start going through and gathering information. Go through the steps. Make sure the steps that you're writing that you can follow along with your own work. Draft the remainder of it. Put it through. You know, just start piecing it together. You don't have to start at point A and work all the way down. You go through the review. Send it to people. You know, the document groups. I work with Ubuntu all the time. The mailing list is perfect for that. Mailing lists in anything is perfect for that. Send the file up. Get some feedback back. Prefix instructions with a clear heading that summarizes the task. Let them know what you're going to be doing before you give them all the information. But when you do that, don't wait till step 5 to write, well, before you start this process, do this. That happens a lot. I see it quite a bit in a lot of system docs where you take a prerequisite and you add it in as an afterthought, like, oh yeah, I forgot about this. Make sure you move that back up to the top so you go through all the prereqs before they start going through step by step. Avoid more than approximately 10 steps. Right about 10 steps, people get overwhelmed. If you need to have it, if there's more steps than that, then break them up a little bit by explaining what you're doing or something small. And one of the last things, and then I'll let you guys get back to the regular thing here, but one of the last things is omit the fluff. There's two reasons why you don't want to have a lot of fluff. One is because it's a lot longer, it's a lot harder to edit, but also is it ports into translation. For those of you that speak multiple languages, you know how hard it is to take a long, complicated sentence and translate it. If it's a simple sentence, it's simpler to translate. A good example of this. This means that it should be pretty cross-sectional. A good tutorial should show off most of the different areas of the project. Now, this sentence has many of words, pretty, most, good, that don't add any meaning to the sentence whatsoever. Those should be avoided. Some other ones, different areas and the project, are very, very vague. A way to restructure that sentence would be, this means that it should be cross-sectional. A tutorial would show off the major areas of your project. It means the exact same thing, a lot less fluff. Getting started for actually the writing of the documentation, most of it's written in XML. Whether it's DocBook or Mallard, and there's, I believe, a couple others out there. But it's very simple markup language. Very easy to learn, and it's a good starting point for those users that don't have a lot of programming experience that want to help out. It's a place that everyone needs help in. Is there any questions? Comments?
I just
Yeah.
have one question as far as the current status of the KDE documentation.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's sort of this internal push for like putting everything on wikis and that sort of thing. Is that helping for maintenance at all, or are we just making a mess even messier?
The problem with wikis is that it's almost breaking off into a separate branch. System docs can be ported over to wikis. But the problem is the more information you have for official information, the more places it's in, is the more places you have to remember to change when something upgrades. I know for Ubuntu, we're working on setting up the help center for online. We've written it into our actual documents, so we can actually pretty much just open the docs, our system docs, and it'll run online as well as offline, just as easily. That's the joys of XML. Putting things on wikis, great idea. I think it's wonderful. Ubuntu's done a wonderful job of that with Wikidot and also help.ubuntu. But the problem is that the more places you have the same information, the more places you have to change. And most people will, that's because of the size of the project, you've got different people working on the different areas. So it's a good idea. I encourage it. Just watch for changes. When changes happen, that's the only problem that's creating.
Okay, so for a project like KDE, which is significantly undermanned on the documentation side, should we just be deciding to scrap one of these efforts and just say all the documentation is on the wiki, or all the documentation is hard documentation, or something like that, in order to prevent?
I think the best way to.
What can you do with lack of manpower?
I think the best way to do it, and like I said, Kubuntu has taken this model and it's working out quite well for us. Richard Johnson and I are working on it, and I know he does the KDE docs as well. And I'm going to start working more on the KDE side than a specific distro. But what we've done for the Kubuntu side is all the XML files are just, as they're upgraded, they get upgraded on the server as well. And because it's XML, it's perfect for the web side. And so as we make the changes automatically get changed up on the wiki. That's I think the best way for an undermanned project to do that, is have the editing in one place and use the core from the XML to go over to the web server.
Would there be any potential, since we established that wiki editing is a great way to track contributors, but maybe wiki storage isn't the best way to keep the documentation up to date? Would there be scope for having a wiki-style editing interface that outputs DocBook or is somehow converted to a, let's say, small C canonical back to wikis, to applications, to HTML documentation?
That would be the perfect way to do it. The problem, one of the hard parts with wikis is that because, you know, you have, it's complete user generated for a wiki. A help center where it's not exactly a wiki would be the best place to have official documentation or system documentation online. Wikis trying to maintain the content that comes in, you know, things that work for me may not work for you type of thing. That's for more of the advanced topics. I think it's perfect for as long as it's maintained. Having a repository for the system docs to port out, I think, is a wonderful idea. That didn't quite answer your question, did it?
The thing that I'm worried about with wikis is that compared to DocBook is
Mhm.
very strongly semantically structured, whereas wiki is only kind of multi-level documentation,
Right.
multi-level bullet points really in sections.
Right.
I wonder if there's any way to kind of construct the necessary semantic information for a useful DocBook from a wiki.
There probably is. I'm not sure how, it depends how the wiki structures and stores its information. That's what it comes down to.
It would be a good project. It would be making documentation accessible in a way that, in the case of Ubuntu, Rosetta makes the translation stuff accessible.
Right. It would be a great project, and I think it would solve a lot of the internal issues that happens with documentation a lot, with arguments of, well, do you go with the official or do you create a separate project? You know, where's everything stored? How's it stored? It would help solve a lot of that if it would be more cross, being able to generate DocBook from a wiki and vice versa, a wiki from DocBook. Any other questions? All right, thank you.